If people could please take their seats, we'd like to start the second session. Oh, yes, these are mine. Yes, these are mine. These are mine. Thank you. We could take our seats, so we'd like to start the second session. Because, of course, one thing women like to say is that they're very disciplined and we keep to our time. So we have to prove it today by making sure we do start on time. Empowered, engaged, energized. What a great title for a conference about women. Women Enhancing Democracy is the title for this conference. And I think democracy already feels enhanced by having so many terrific women here. And this is the second panel. What is its title? Women's Economic Independence. What a huge challenge that is. My name is Lise Doucette. I'm a journalist, I'm Canadian, and I'm a woman. So, I hope that's obvious. Like all of you here, I'm here because I am passionate about making sure there are more women involved in all aspects of life. And as Ambassador Verveer said, it's not because we're nice, although we are nice. It's because it's necessary. A necessary part of developing our societies that women are involved in politics, economics, social, every aspect of life. But in this particular session, we want to focus on the economics. What were some of the points that we picked up from the first session? Well, from the president of Finland, she brought out the shocking statistics that some of us have heard before, that women do 2/3 of the work, but they only make 1/3 of the income. And what about the statistics that Ambassador Verveer brought up, which is something between $40 to $47 billion is lost in the Asia-Pacific region because women are not involved. In this session, we want to be very practical, because that, at least they say, is what women are like. We're practical people. We like to get things done. And not just like to get things done, we do get things done. So I've told all the panelists, you know, I come from a democracy, but sometimes you have to be a dictator. I've said to them, we're going to have a conversation. We want practical examples. And because I'm a journalist, I hope I'll be excused, that I look at these things in terms of what's happening in the news. Let's just look and see. What about women in the news? I just happen to have this paper. It's yesterday's paper, but for a lot of our friends who've come from the United States, they still feel it's yesterday. In fact, it almost is yesterday. What is on the front page of the International Herald Tribune? Well, there's good news for women. U.S. backing catapults Lagarde to top of IMF. The first time a woman is heading a financial institution. Way to go! We've come a long way. What's below the fold? German women stuck at home. Germany, the economic powerhouse. What are the statistics in Germany? Only 6% of women with 2 children are in the workplace. All of the DAX 30 companies are run by men. And yet this is a country run by a woman. But she comes from Eastern Europe. The article says that actually when the state becomes more involved, actually you can make more progress. We're going to hear a bit more about that today. Does it have to be that way? Well, look at page 2. Norway. What has made the difference in Norway? Well, listen to this quotation from the head of the Norwegian Confederation of Trade, a mother of 2. Norwegian women work, pay taxes, and have babies. That's our secret. And that, to me, sums it up. Can women be mothers, partners, wives, but also key and leading members of the economy? It has been the dilemma of women since time eternal. But don't give up. Don't be afraid, as the president of Lithuania says, because we have some practical examples, some advice from our panelist. And the poor man who has to be the man who's going to start it off, it's not as that we're against men. In fact, part of our problem is that we've been too nice to men, don't you think? But we're going to be nice to the president of Mongolia today, who's going to start our discussions, Elbador Tasakia, who's the president of Mongolia. And of course, he never does things by half. He was prime minister twice, elected to parliament 4 times, the first to obtain Western education. He has 4 sons, but that wasn't good enough, so he adopted a daughter. And that wasn't good enough, so he adopted and fostered 24 children. So he cares about the family. Now, for all of you, because he comes from Mongolia, I come from Canada, he has thrown out his speech for you, for all of you women. That's the first thing he did for women today. He threw out his speech. Thank you very much. And I've asked him, because I checked the United Nations ECOSOC report, which said that Mongolia actually has done systematic things to try to improve the economy. And yet, despite a systematic approach, that women still very much remain in the informal economy, and most of it is not paid work. So, Mr. President, what are you going to do about it?
Thank you. I wish to have answer to that question. You know, when I start this kind of talk, I think it's easier to talk about my life experience. I was born and raised in a herdsman's family. And I have 7 brothers. And you know, in my family, only my mother, and there are 9 men, including my father. And I raised in that environment. And I saw every time how hard my mother was working for us. And from that, the great respect to my mother. And you know, my mother had only 1 month schooling opportunity. And in Mongolia, we have a very high literacy rate. From my mother's experience, when she had only 1 month to study in school, and she actually taught me how to do my homework. And she was a real leader. And also in my home, she was the single decision-making body. All others, they implementing, including my father. And, you know, from our history, in our society, in Mongolian society, women played very high role. And I would like to say, not from the economic point of view, from the legal point of view, what we did in Mongolia on gender equality. Mongolia was one of the first countries to ratify the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women. If there is any state not ratified that convention, I call for ratification. It's very useful. In 1992, in our Constitution, we stated that men and women enjoy equal rights in political, economic, social, and cultural fields, as well as in marriage. In 2005, our parliament passed law that especially addressed domestic violence. In February 2011, our parliament passed law on gender equality. Some examples. You know, in Mongolia, there are working age people between the 51% are men are working and 49% women. In terms of the work in Mongolia, almost equal. There is no difference paying the wages, pay difference. There is no difference in Mongolia, no at all. And education, 60% of our girls are studying in colleges, universities. There are 60% of them. And 30% from our local parliaments are actually women. But in a high level, in a central parliament, we have problem with that. Other thing, I think when I see what kind of women are more successful when they address those social issues, those injustice issues, when they talk about the gender issues. I think they are. I think when they address those social issues, I think those gender issues are social issues. When they address social issues, I think they tend to be more successful. For these 20 years, I worked with many wonderful women in my country, leaders. You know, Mongolia is a single country in our part of the world making the dual transformation, political and economic liberalization at the same time, since the 1990.
When you give that figure of use, that's quite, that 51% of men and 49% of women,
working.
If I go back to working, if I go back to my first question, what kind of work are they doing? Is this paid work? Because you said there's no differential
it's
in
paid
pay.
Work. It's
They're not
paid
just
work.
working in the home and that's regarded as being part of...
Yes, it's paid work. It's like doctors and teachers, you know. It's all paid work.
And how did you get to that point then in Mongolia? During the time, because you've been in politics a long time, have you learned any lessons on the way in terms of what has to be done if you would, and I'm assuming because you're here today, that you do want to see women being more involved in economic life, equal to men. What have you seen to be necessary to be done in order to do that, and what still has to be done?
I think, first of all, of course, those legal foundations.
Legal.
And we have those things in place. And also, I think everyone should be not shy talking about the gender equality in a society. That's very important. And supporting, you know, there are almost, in our culture in Asia, in Mongolia, there is no discrimination. There is no discrimination culture. Even during, you know, Han's time, Genghis Khan, Kublai Khan, one example only I would like to say. When the Marco Polo traveled to Mongolian Empire, when he saw how women are taking the high road in Mongolian society in that empire, he wrote, I would say that the race of women is superior to the race of men. That was 800 years ago in Mongolia.
No, but I know, I mean...
But one thing that's really difficult to keep today, yeah.
But then why would the UN point this up and say that much more has to be done? When women leaders come to you, and I'm assuming they do, what is it they ask for you to still do? Because you paint a very rosy picture. And I'm glad that if it is indeed, but what still has to be done? Because from the United Nations reports, it sounds as though there still is quite a lot to do in terms of women being in senior positions in the economy and making the kind of incomes that you say is allowed because there isn't a difference in the pay gap.
I think there is only, there are a number of issues we have to address. One issue, of course, the issue in senior positions, in a decision-making position, in a parliament level, in a government level, still Mongolia is lagging behind. And now in my parliament, we are trying to pass the law, and which has a certain, how to call it, proportion of the women should be elected by law. You know, have to have that
quota.
Quota.
You want a quota?
Yeah, that. Our women want to have that quota. But there are, of course, male-dominating decision-making system in a parliament. They are quite reluctant. And as a president, I have to push that. I have to take that leadership role in my country. For example, it can be done. In my country, for example, I initiated a ban on death penalty. And that is still existing in Mongolia, and we are getting the support from our society. Now I think it's time to support our women, initiating and supporting that quota in all levels, decision making and parliament. And I'm saying that I have to do that in my home, not only saying in an international forum like in this here.
Yes.
And here also some of our leader women are here because of that. I have to go to do that job in my country. And next time, I will to say we have a quota, we have a, you know, comparing with that year, we have this kind of success.
Well, there's a lot of women who are going to hold you to account, sir. I don't know whether first you deal with the death penalty and then you deal with women. I'm not sure about this ordering of priorities, but we're glad it's priority number 2. And I think what Seema Samar mentioned in her comments about the 25% quota for women in the Afghan parliament. And I know some women here do feel uneasy about the quota because sometimes it can end in tokenism. But as I mentioned earlier, in Norway, it has certainly, when Norway said 40% of the boardroom has to be women, everyone said, oh, don't be so stupid. But in fact, it is working. It's working in Afghanistan too. But I want to bring in our next speaker because my sources tell me that our next speaker actually doesn't agree with quotas. So it's good to have a debate about this. Solvita Albutina is from Latvia. She's the Speaker of the Latvian Parliament, has been trained as a lawyer and has had a long distinguished career in various ministries connected to the legal field, and now as Speaker of the Parliament, she's in a position to try to make some of these things work. Now, you don't think quotas are going to work. I understand in Latvia that actually, despite the economic recession, women have been getting into senior roles in the economy. But what has worked and what has still to be done?
Thank you, Madam Chairperson, for your question and for an opportunity to share views about women's complex role in the contemporary world. Some weeks ago, we awarded a reputation prize to the best business leaders in Latvia. And among the top 10 of the entrepreneurs, there were 5 outstanding Latvian women who can be characterized as well-educated, persuasive, and socially responsible business leaders. And the European Commission research also shows that Latvia occupies the high 3rd place in the European Union in the percentage of women leading business. These women are highly appreciated and respected in my country. Their contribution is important for well-being and sustainability of our nation. And why so? I believe that it's because women are use power not for ruling, but for serving the society. These are women with rich experience, eager to meet challenges, and ready to take responsibility not only for business track records, but also for employees and their family, and for well-being. This is especially important for us in Latvia in this period when Latvia is coming through the global financial and economical crisis and strives hard to return to the path of development and to make our national economy more competitive. And it seems that we are succeeding. Statistically, gender equality looks good in Latvia. Women make up to 30% of employers, 50% of Supreme Court judges, more than 30% of rectors or presidents of higher education institutions, but 90% of elected members of parliament. But this statistical data does not mean that it is time to celebrate in Latvia. Stereotypes and prejudices about women's roles still exist in our society too. In Latvia, women build half of the society, but nevertheless, women are the minority elected in the parliament. The same society elected only 90% women in parliament. In the eyes of a great part of our primary place is still home, children, kitchen, Kinder, Kirche, Küche. And we are inconvenient employees because our children fall ill. To the best advantage, women professionally are employable as nurses, teachers, shop assistants, and psychologists. In other words, women have to withstand double stress. They have to be good mothers, well-looking, but at the same time constructive and professional. Such prejudices about gender and justice and so-called gender roles have to be erased. It's my strong belief that such changes cannot be reached with the help of restrictive mechanisms and quotas. Yes, no. Democracy and justice starts in our education and in our educated and free minds. And I share the view that the main milestone for women's expanded futures role and economic independence is education and knowledge. It unlocks our potential and opens our minds. And if we are free, we are ready to participate in every field of society. Allow me to stress that differences between genders can be removed only by changing the way of thinking, by changing the social environment and general attitude towards women economic, social, and political activity. I myself have a family and 2 children, and I have been in politics for many years. And every day and every hour, I try to prove with my work that women can be successful both as a political leader and as a mother. It's very important to be and to stay a mother and to wife. But it is not only education and knowledge that change an attitude. It's also very important that female leaders who serve as good and persuasive example help to break out of the captivity of prejudices. Such women and their life stories serve as persuasive example for Latvian society and also globally. I am convinced that our former president, Mrs. Vaira Vīķa-Freiberga, has inspired many people around the world. By setting a positive example, she has served as a source of energy for other women at moment when they lose heart and life seems become grey. I am also convinced that every leader of this distinguished audience plays the same positive and high important role in the society. And everybody of us can play this positive example that everything is possible and we can reach everything what we want. Madam Chairperson, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I am really thankful to our Lithuanian hosts for bringing us together and giving us the opportunity to share our visions. Thank you.
It's very interesting because you come from a legal background, so you've looked at the law. The law can be a very powerful tool in both directions, and yet you have come to the conclusion. Can I just because I'd like to know what people think, just by a show of hands, how many women here, women and men here, think that using legal instruments, including quotas, is the best way forward in terms of giving women a greater... Initiative. Yes. Yes, okay. Yes, and let's see how many think, like our esteemed speaker from Latvia, that it's not the best way forward. Oh, interesting.
We are minority.
Interesting. Why you put your hand up? Why don't you? Why you emphatically put your hand up? Are you a lawyer? No, an economist. Oh. Yes.
We've got a very high degree of workforce being women. I think Sweden, Norway, and Denmark have got the highest percentage in the world. But I would hate ever getting one seat at a board because I'm a woman. I want to be elected because I'm the best. And I don't believe in quotas.
Yes. But can she be the best? I mean, Sima Samar, I'm sure, is the best, but she didn't come in through the quota, but good women still come.
I think
interesting.
In order to have that culture, in order to have that culture in a society, you have to use initially quota system, I think. When you come to the equal level, in the decision making, I think that's maybe not necessarily.
Yes.
I think initially you have to use that.
I think that what you should do is actually, but I was going to say that afterward during the...
Yes, but I just wanted, because it's just to pick up on why,
putting a focus on education, making sure that women are empowered to get the right education, that's point number one. Today we have more women than men who take a university degree. Point two, making the women understand that if they want to have the top seat, they have to fight for it and not give up halfway. Women have a tendency to be a little bit more adverse towards conflicts. They have to learn to say this. And point three, teach the men also to take care of the kids. Because that's the third problem. Make kindergarten. If you do that, there's no problem.
Well, there's another important point too, which I hope we'll get to in the discussion, is about making it possible for women to be in the workplace. But I just wanted to get a sense of the audience for this, and it was a very good point. We're constantly reminded of this, as they say, the Nordic face of women in senior positions, women, being able to express themselves, take top positions. So I'm going to bring in now Maud Elisabeth Olofsson, who's the Minister for Enterprise and Energy in Sweden. You're going to bring energy for women here. And as I mentioned to you earlier, just give us some practical examples about getting women into the workplace that you have come across. You got there. What is the best way to get there?
Well, thank you very much. Just a few words on quotas. I'm also the party leader of the Centre Party in Sweden, and I've been there for 10 years. And I think as a role model, when you take the lead, you can also show other women that they can take the important steps in politics. So I think you have to decide in a political party, in a business sector, wherever, you have to decide yourself what is the best way of developing your party, your business. Well, it's to have equal opportunities for men and women. So from that sense, you can also be a role model yourself. Let me start by, I'm now the Minister for Enterprise and Energy, but I started my journey in the late 80s. I was appointed as a coordinator for business advisory programs in my municipality. And I went to the municipality and asked them, how many women in business do we have in this community? And they told me, there are 4. And I said to them, well, that cannot be true. It must be more, because I know more than 4 women in business. But they went to the catalogue and they saw that, well, it was only 4. Well, we started to count them, and it was 55. The thing was that they didn't count them. Well, they were just hair cutters. They had just had a shop. They were not counted as business women. So we started to make a catalog our own. We started with advisory programs, we started with mentor programs and all that. And we created a very intensive discussion on the municipality level at that time. How can we support women in business in the right way? In 1992, I was appointed as a political advisor to the Minister of Labour, and I was appointed also to be responsible for a program for women in business. It was the first time in Swedish history where we had a program for women in business. And we started with research programs, because I know from the practical level that if you don't have the facts and figures, you cannot discuss. And I think that's what was said here before also. When you count, when you measure, when you show the figures, then you can also discuss what to do. So we started a great research programs. The second thing we did was we asked the women, if you want some advice for your business, how does it work if you look at Sweden right now? And they said, well, when we come to these advisors, they don't know about our business. And they always talk to us like, oh, should you start that shop? Do you have any finance? Can you go and get a bank loan? Does your husband know about what you're doing? And that was in the 90s in Sweden. So we started programs for advice. So we supported women advisors all around Sweden. We started resource centers, and we also started microfinance programs for women. It worked very well, and it was quite successful. The interesting thing about this was about the microfinance, because when we measured this, it had a very good result. But the most interesting thing was the women paid back their loans much better than the men did in the programs that we had. We went out to power, and it slowed down a little bit. But in 2006, I became the Minister of Enterprise and Energy. So at that time, I had really a chance to put focus on women in business again. So we started up a program again, and we broadened the program with more of microfinance, more of advice and training programs, more of mentor programs. Because what we saw was that many of the women, they didn't have experience in business. So they needed some advice. And we picked both men and women as advisors and mentors. And it worked very well. We also started a program in women ambassadors. Because what we saw was that a lot of women, they didn't have self-confidence enough to start at their own business. So we appointed 900 Swedish women around the whole country, which were out in the schools, they were out in meetings of all kinds, and they told the others about their own experience. And what happened then was that many of these women that were listening to those women, they said, well, if she can do it, I can do it. And it was a very simple program, and that just showed their own experience from the practical level. And I think that has been a very good program in the whole program. And we also initiated a similar program on the European level during our presidency in 2009. And I think now 20 out of 27 countries in Europe have women ambassadors program. We have also started innovation programs for women. And if you talk to women, they say, well, we are not innovators. Because if you talk about innovation, you always talk about a man who has a business and make a product. That's an innovation. It should be a car or a cell phone or whatever. But normally, and very often in the service sector, we have a lot of women in business. And they create a lot of new innovations. But they don't see it as innovations. We have started a program in the health sector. And I met a woman in Gothenburg just a couple of months ago. And she was so proud because she had created an innovation that helped her to make a better living for the patients. And I asked her, are you an innovator? No, I'm not, she said. But when I started to talk to her and she told me about what she was doing in the healthcare, she was an innovator. And I think that's very normal because women, they don't have that much money. They don't have the power. It's a lack of influence. But we do a lot on a practical level. So from a political side, you have to lift it up and show that this is also innovation. So in that program, I think a lot of proud women now are taking further steps when it comes to look at themselves as innovators. So there are some practical things that we are doing. And I think what we see now is proud women which can earn money, and that is also a problem. I've said that as a businesswoman, you have to tell the others that I want to earn money. I want to be rich. But we have a discussion in our country that, well, is it good to become rich when you have your own business? Shouldn't you just be a little bit not that forced to take a position or be rich? Shouldn't you just do it for fun or whatever? But I think it's necessary that we look upon the business sector also as women, that we want to be successful, we want to be have power, we want to earn money, and we want to be rich. So there are some examples. And what I see is that if you want to create a better situation for women in rich countries, in poor countries, I think women in business is crucial. And I met some of the women in India, which is active in hand down in south of India. And I met a woman there, and she told me about her business. And she had no teeth, she was very poor, but she created her own business. And she said to me, well, you know, Maud, what I can do now, I can give education to my children. And I don't need to ask my husband. So I think women in business has to be in the top of agenda. Just like Marlene Verveer said here, top of the agenda, because that's the way of giving women power and also give education to their children. And that can also change the economic development in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ahmad, and thank you very much for giving us some of the details of what Sweden has done practically to try to get women into the workplace. Because as Solvita mentioned, and I think all of us would agree, education, education, education. But it's not just, as you described, those 5 businesswomen who run the prize, well-educated. It's training as well. And we've seen in countries like Afghanistan and Iraq, women who in their 30s, 40s, 50s, who never learned how to read or write, now go to literacy classes and can actually then learn how to run a business. It's never too late to learn. So education in all of its facets. The other point I picked you up for, Maud, is that, girls, one of the best things that would help us is that men who know how to count. How many women have come up to me through the years and they said, they told us we couldn't find any women. We didn't have enough women business people. We didn't have enough women to be United Nations envoys. The women are there. And it underlines again, unless women are at the table in politics and in economics and in all the major international institutions, the women's voices, the women's face is not going to get there. I want to quickly bring in our next speaker, Salima Ahmed, because she is very much at the coalface of trying to give women practical advice about how to be more active in the workplace, in the economic sphere. And after she speaks, I want to open it to the audience to get, I don't want any speeches, but if anyone has any examples of where they've been involved in practical programs to get women in and want to pass it on as good practice. But first, Salima Ahmed, who's the president of the Bangladeshi Women's Chamber of Commerce and Industry. It was specifically founded to give voice to the interests of women, to help them become more represented in the workplace. Salima Ahmed.
First of all, let me thank Women's Democracy Network for bringing me here, and it's a truly honor to speak in front of you. I just want to give a background of myself. I was married when I was 16 years old, and my son was born when I was 17 years old. But one thing, 2 things was driving me crazily was that I must make myself economically empowered and must make myself educated, because I have seen my mother, grandmother, and surrounded women in our country that they were voiceless. And in our country, if a man says just leave the house, she just have to leave and no security. So I started my own business and again joined a family business. Started with $500 and now we have a $300 million turnover company. But one good thing of empowering, being an empowered woman, I think that is the best part of any woman we all are sitting here, that when we are empowered, we want to empower other women too. And with my experiences, I wanted to form a separate chamber of commerce for women. Because why? Because Bangladesh, as you know, it's very famous for micro enterprises, microfinance. But it was always with me that these micro enterprises, are they a part of mainstream economy? Or how much they are empowered? Because to me, micro enterprise is good for livelihood, but empowerment, there is a big question. So I thought that it is very important and high time for Bangladesh to bring small entrepreneurship by bringing micro enterprise and developing and growing them into the mainstream. And I wanted to address 4 issues. And 4 issues was that when a micro enterprise wants to grow, they need access to finance. They need access to market. They need access to market linkages. They need product and design development, and they need to know the benefits of networking, the art of networking. And the chamber started with that work. And we are very lucky that, we always had good partners. And with the access to finance, the bank was not giving higher loan. I'm sure many of you face that thing. $500 microfinance institutions, there are many. But when the woman wants to have, $50,000 or $20,000, there was none. So we started a policy advocacy. We started with Center for International Private Enterprise, one of our partner organizations. We started policy advocacy to have a separate allocation for women entrepreneurs. And we make coalition, and we did a Women's National Business Agenda, and it was coalition with 180 organizations and with 1,500 women entrepreneurs, and we tried to find out the issues. And we did backward-forward advocacies, talking to the bankers, talking to the women entrepreneurs, and going back to the ministers. And in 2006, a separate allocation, $30 million, was allocated only for women entrepreneurs without collateral and low rate of interest. But the bank was not giving. Bank said it is expensive to deal with a $50,000. So bank was not giving, even the $30 million was allocated. So again, we started our policy advocacy. And then again, 2008, a separate allocation came. 15% must be given to women entrepreneurs. So all the banks, it is a mandate. So now if you go to Dhaka city, you'll see billboard of schemes for women entrepreneurs, because now bankers are running after women entrepreneurs. Because it's a mandatory, 15% need to be given. But I think for another thing is also very important for women entrepreneurs is market access, product development and design development. And also very important to know about their rights. And when we did the Women's National Business Agenda with the coalition, we wanted to prioritize the agendas, and we thought the access to finance will come first. But you know what came first? Social barriers. Because women says that even if I have money, even if I am an entrepreneur, I need a gender-friendly environment. I need my own rights to come to my home whenever I need to come. I cannot be abused by men or the husband that why you are late. I cannot be abused by the other businessmen when I'm sitting in the marketplace. So we also had a program with International Republican Institute, a Women's Democracy Network, where we taught our members about their rights. This is called, we published a book, it's called Amar Adhikar, which is My Rights, which we have given training to our members, to our entrepreneurs, that what is your rights. Bangladesh Constitution gives men and women equal rights. And many women said, oh, we never knew about it, that we are equal. So bringing information to women about their rights is very, very important, giving that information. And second agenda came was capacity building, and third, again, it was access to finance. So I think, everything, entrepreneurship is something that is very, very possible. Everyone cannot be entrepreneur, but many can be entrepreneur if you really give them a separate policy, a gender-friendly environment. And I always say that, when I was seeing this E's, I always say about CDEs. It's 3 C's I'd like to talk about is creativity. We need to facilitate women into their creativity because they are very committed. And that will make them competent to survive in the business industry. And the 3 Ds, that the woman has dream, and we all need to work to fulfill, to facilitate their dream, and to see that they are dedicated and bring the determination to do their businesses. And that CD leads to another 3 E's: entrepreneurship, enterprise, empowerment. And that is very important because I think democracy, empowerment goes together. Democracy facilitates entrepreneurship. Democracy facilitates empowerment. Democracy gives an individual to choose what she or he wants to do. So in Bangladesh, when we formed this policy, separate policy for women entrepreneurs, 4,000 women enterprises got this loan, and 25,000 employment has been generated. A country where 70% people are poor, 40% people are below poverty. For them, these only 4,000 women enterprises has created 25,000. So you can see that if we give opportunity, if we build the capacity of the women entrepreneurs, how to do their marketing, how to develop their product, how to access in the market, it is so important that they can do it. And I always say, illiteracy is not at all a problem, but we need to educate. We need to educate women. We need to build their capacity. And the spirit of entrepreneurship will bring benefits to our family, to our community, and to the people, and to our democratic nation. Thank you.
Thank you. Seema, I just want to pick up on one point, because you mentioned about microfinance and some of the limitations of it, and Maud Elizabeth also mentioned microfinance. And of course, ever since Muhammad Yunus got the Nobel Peace Prize for microfinance, it suddenly became very fashionable. But of late, there has been a lot of criticism in saying actually for a lot of women it hasn't meant empowerment. And Salim, I don't know whether you seem to suggest that you weren't quite sure that was the way forward, because it has been seen as one of the tools, particularly in Asia, to help women get onto the ladder. But what do you think now?
You know, I always feel that women becomes very powerful when they are in a group. Like, you know, in Bangladesh also, because of corruption, we have also seen that women could not get trade license because they are facing corruption, so they didn't want it to go. So we had a program where we educate or trained our women to fight against corruption. Our agenda was, get your things done, but don't bribe. So when she went first time, couldn't do it, next day she said, all right, you know, within herself. And next day she went there with a group. So we built advocacy team in all the divisions. And that group goes, 7 women goes together. And do you think that corrupted person has any sort of, you know...
So you think that microfinance can be improved by if women have a better approach?
Oh, I have examples.
Being questioned now.
Yeah, I have examples. Like, I know women entrepreneurs who are into very small micro enterprises, doing handicrafts, or a farmer producing potato. Now they are exporting.
So you feel it is working?
Absolutely working. Only you have to give access to finance, but not only the access to finance, have to build capacity, and you need to create a gender-friendly environment.
More support. Models, you wanted to come in on that because you mentioned it specifically as a tool.
Yeah, and I think microfinance is a good way of starting your own business. I agree, you have to continue with other programs as well. But it's a good start for you if you have a business idea. And when you see that you can create your own business, you can get your own income, you also grow as a person. And I've seen it so many times, because many women, they don't believe in themselves. But if they can have access to finance, and we can create different type of programs, I think that they also believe that, well, this is just the start. I can grow and I can be bigger. And I think it works both in rich countries and in poorer countries. And that's the fine.
But entrepreneurs reported that they were voiceless before doing the businesses. And now they said that they listed many benefits of being involved into the businesses. And now they say they have greater control over their own income, and also a role in the family's decision-making, and also mobility, because that is also one thing that they didn't have the freedom of mobility. The entrepreneurship gives an woman empowerment to be mobile, to have their own decision. So I always say I believe in women and entrepreneurship.
I just want to see whether, because I mean these and just so we don't forget that one of the things you mentioned was the P word, prejudice, talking about women face prejudice at home. So even you also mentioned it in Latvia. These two very different societies culturally. It is something that's at the root of this. I'm not going to give it right now, but before we end the session, we should come back to it. I think we might get to it with our gender sessions. But focusing on these very specific packages. Very specific packages. Does anyone in the audience want to bring up an example of where they found that they either were part of a package, know about a package of loans, microfinance, something that worked in a certain society. We want to let me just see whether we'll bring in someone else first. Yes. I think there's microphones here. Where's the gentleman?
I'd like to comment on what Salima was saying, and many of your audience.
I want to just deal with this point first, and then we'll come back to that. But that's okay. I just want to keep to a thread of thought.
No, I leave the packaging till the end, then. But
okay,
I would like to comment on what they say because
I'll come back to you. So, does someone want to specifically comment? Yes, right here. I'll come back to you. Don't worry.
I think I would like to comment on enterprise and microfinance. My name is Mariam Aslan, and I head the United Nations Trust Fund to End Violence Against Women. But I have been in development work for 25 years now. And I have seen microfinance work and don't work, and women's entrepreneurship work and don't work in Uzbekistan, in Tajikistan, in Kyrgyzstan, in Afghanistan, in Africa, in Kenya, Somalia, Sudan, Tanzania. So my worry has always been that we are trying to create, without knowing, maybe prototypes of women and men, that certain packages, entrepreneurship or microfinance, can work and empower. But not so many people around the world, women or men, are necessarily business people. And self-owned business is not the only answer, neither for women's empowerment nor for men's empowerment. And I think the important thing is for policymakers as a whole, not to think only in terms of entrepreneurship, but in terms of labor inclusion, social support packages, social services, employment creation, and business as well, opening finances as well.
So what would you say is an alternative, rather than encouraging people you think sometimes wrongly to set up their own business?
It is not. What is important is not to concentrate on one silver bullet. There is no silver bullet. I mean, it is not only microfinance, it is employment creation, it is inclusion of women in variety of works in labor market, it is creation of the environment for women to be included in many jobs and variety of jobs, not only in self-employment. This is what I am saying. And having the policies to do that. And education has been said as one thing, but it is a very progressive thing. And the playing field is not level, unfortunately. Whether you want to enter the politics or economics or social field, many women are excluded because of poverty, but also because of other things. And we have to recognize that level field is not, and playing field is not level. And policies that can include the woman without waiting 30 generations. I mean, when I was listening to you all, I was also remembering a woman, for example, when we talked about statistics and violence against women and so on. One woman said, I think it was in Rwanda, how many times I have to say I am raped till I can get justice? I mean, how many times women have to say that they don't have the possibility, whatever it is, till we create the policies behind it?
Just one brief comment from you then, Will. Yeah.
Well, just to add on, I think it's very important that one common feature is that you need the rule of law. No matter where it is. You need the rule of law in order to create gender equality, and then you can go on with education and business entrepreneurs. I just wanted to say Denmark has got a program in Uganda, a 440 million krona program, where we're trying to facilitate the help of women farmers and entrepreneurs and the youth. And apart from what Maud and Salim has already said, where I completely agree, I think one of the things that we are trying to promote is to help them advocate for change themselves. Because we can be part of it in the beginning, help them remove obstacles.
after the finance, help to create productivity, but in the long run, they have to learn to speak up for themselves, speak up for the voice of change, for new obstacles to come. So that's just one thing to add on.
Thank you very much. I want to bring in our next speaker now, Manaz Afkami, who's from Iran. She's long been an advocate of women's rights in the Islamic world. She's now the president of Women's Learning Partnership. And when we spoke before the panel, she mentioned how she is becoming involved in helping the women in some of the societies which are emerging from either revolutions or uprisings, be it Egypt or Tunisia. And Huda Badran made that point of what is it about revolutions? They start with cries for freedom and rights, but they don't end up necessarily in greater women's empowerment or, just as importantly, jobs for women. So, Manaz, do you want to give us some of your practical insights into what you're part of this process now of giving advice to women in this process, and you could share some with us?
Yes, thank you. I would like to actually go back to some of my own personal experiences, starting in Iran and then going through a similar uprising that now we're facing in other Muslim-majority countries where our partners are facing extraordinary challenges as well as huge opportunities. What I faced when I was teaching at the university in Tehran many years ago before the revolution began with a very small incident. I went to the bank at the branch of the bank at the university, and I wanted to open an account for my child. And I was told that not only I couldn't open an account with my own money for my own child, but if my husband came and took my money and opened that account, he would be the only one who could take the money out. That sort of was one of the shocks, that had both the legal and economic aspects of it, which I've been facing all along with our partners throughout the world, actually, not just Muslim-majority societies. And it led me, of course, to looking at the laws and led to creation of a university women's association that I helped found, and then I was head of the Iranian Women's Organization and then Minister for Women, the first one, and I hope not the last one in Iran. And those positions gave me the opportunity to travel a lot, but all sorts of parts of the country and sit with women asking what exactly is it that they prioritize. And I thought myself that it would be laws because, here Iran was one of the countries where the family laws took almost every possible right that one could wish for from women, from polygamy to no right to divorce, to the right to travel, to hold a job, to all of the things that here in the West we take for granted. But time after time, I heard women say that, of course, legal change is very important. But if the husband is beating me, if I'm not having enough sustenance, and if I have the right to divorce, which is very important, what am I going to do with myself and my children unless I have economic independence, unless I can support myself and my children? So the two are very much interconnected, and now also we see the same struggle going on throughout the Middle East. And what we have found with our partners in the MENA region and elsewhere is that you need a certain set of situations and possibilities before you can reach the optimum position that we all wish for. First and foremost, we've been talking about education, but we know that in many of the developing countries, Muslim majority countries, women are the majority of higher education graduates out of the universities. In Iran, for instance, 60%, in other parts of the Middle East, the same. So they do have the education. What we need is marketable skills, which is extraordinarily important, not just degrees, but marketable skills, and that's something that is not always available for women. The other thing that is possibly even more important than marketable skills, and it's been mentioned from time to time, is a sense of agency and self-determination. it's been mentioned in one way or the other throughout the discussions that we have had, that unless a woman thinks, and I must use this wonderful, by now cliche, yes, I can, it's not going to happen. That is, we tend to think less of our own capabilities, less of what we need to be paid for our efforts, less of where we need to be placed in terms of policy making. And I think that it's very important to have targeted and specific leadership skills building. And for that, my particular organization, which is again started as a partnership, it wasn't one that developed into one. We started with a shared vision, and that shared vision was what we call 50-50 plus. That is, we do want 50% women all across the board, but we want more. That is, we don't want just a world where there's this man next to this woman. We want a different kind of world. We don't like the one we live in. We don't like the policies that have been made. We don't like the way our environment, our social justice, our poverty, and all of that is going in the world. And for that, we need a new kind of approach, a new kind of leadership, which is participatory, dialogue-based, respect-based, and a kind of a leadership that I don't want to say that women have a better way of doing one thing or a worse way. It's just that we have had a different experiential history which we can bring to the field. We haven't been tested with it, and I think now we have a chance to bring that to the field as well. We have to learn to be aggressive. We have to learn to be competition-oriented. And want to win, but at the same time, we do have something else to offer too, and that is the nourishing and supportive kind of practices that we have historically held. And I think in order for us to reach the goal that we have in mind, we all need culture change, because we seem to sometimes not remember that throughout the world, throughout the history, relationships between men and women has been hierarchical, top-down, command-oriented, and still in most countries it's that way. It's a patriarchal division of labor, and it has changed in some countries faster than others, but it's not too far back to go to see how it was in parts of the West as well. So what we need is culture change, and culture change is something that is painful and it's difficult. In some countries it has happened sort of naturally. In some other countries it has come almost bombarded from other parts of the world. So how do we do that is extraordinarily important. And I'm referring back to the MENA region now. And finally, I got to your question. But you said something at the beginning. You introduced yourself as journalist, Canadian woman. Now, that's a wonderful way of presenting yourself. When we come to the women in the MENA region, everybody seems to think that the first thing about a woman in the MENA region is that I'm a Muslim. It may or may not be. There are 1,200,000,000 women in the Muslim world. Some of them self-identify with their religion. I don't know what Elise's religion is. I don't know whether she wants to have one or not. But a religion may be more important to certain parts of the population and less to others. It's important to everybody as a set of values, but to be exceptionally focused on that is particularly debilitating, in the sense that no equality-based, democracy-based, human rights-based effort for betterment of women can be put inside the box of any religion, you see. Because if you work within the box of any of the traditional religions, you're going to be ruled by those rules. And those rules are, by definition, determined by people who go through the process of gaining the seniority that is needed. And women are not allowed into that process at all. So saying that it's important to have that, to have the culture and religion, we must allow women in these transitional societies to be able to express themselves in terms that are really vital to them every day of their lives. They don't get up every morning and think about holy texts. They get up every morning and want a job, want vaccination for their children, they want education, they want safety, they want security, they want opportunities, they want political participation. So please, if we're thinking practically, how do you help this transition? How do you support this transition in the new democracies or emerging democracies in the Middle East? Please do not go by Islamic exceptionalism. That is something that is both pushed by fundamentalists who like to say that Islam is different than other religions and Muslims are different. And it's also pushed by the opposite groups who want to shun religion altogether. So it's hopeless. If you're Muslim, you're never going to be, like other people. It's not that way. Muslims really, I mean, we have plenty of us around in this room. We're just like anybody else. We really are not different. Sima, are we that different? Are we that different?
Yes.
We may dress like this, we may dress like that. Some of us may have a head cover. We have all sorts of us. But we really want the same things. And the young people especially. Right? Just this week, we have 120 women and men, young women and men, being trained in how to use technology for social networking, for advocacy in Jordan, involving all of the emerging democracies. These young men and women work together. Some of them are veiled, not the men. Sometimes, although the men do that, in Iranian circles now, the men put up the veils to say, to support the women, because it is compulsory in Iran. But they are gender equal, and they work with each other in a very supportive way. And they, I think, are the future of the MENA region. And I think unless we realize that the future is with that group who's connected, who's intelligent and literate, and wants a democratic interaction regardless of gender, religion, and other specifications, that is our future. And that's what we're working for. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Manaz. But actually, Manaz brings up a very interesting point, is that you don't have to look at religion, including Islam, as a problem. You can look at Islam as a solution. I remember one time when Malaysia was doing the meeting of the Organization of the Islamic Conference, and they decided they would look at the Prophet Muhammad as an entrepreneur, as a trader, rather than looking at him as an ideologue or a prophet, someone who's somehow has inspired extremism or different breeds of Islamic thought. Look at the wives of the prophet. Look at Aisha, Khadija. These are women who in this century would be described as entrepreneurial. So go within Islam to find the kind of strength, the kind of reasoning. If women's, and this is, I know, is a trend now for women to start reading the Quran. In the Quran, you'll find in the history of the Prophet Muhammad, his amazing wives, you'll find all you need about women's strength and empowerment. I just want to ask you one question, and then we'll go to this woman here who wanted to ask a question. When you try to raise the issues which you discussed about the new kinds of leadership, bringing women in the MENA region, are you finding that people want to put them on the agenda? Because if you take, for example, Tunisia, for all of the faults and all of the repression in Tunisia, it was regarded as having the greatest equality for women, the greatest promotion of women's rights across that area. And women, when I was there in January, were worried that they would lose some of it. What are you finding? Are this falling on fertile ground?
Actually, I think that we are facing a very significant challenge in that area. For one thing, I really want to applaud your suggestion about using religion as a positive thing, and especially role models. And we always mention that Khadija, the Prophet's first wife, was also his employer. So he worked for her, and she was the first Muslim. So the first Muslim was a woman. So that's a very helpful and a good way of talking about it in those countries. But right now we're facing a tremendous problem because the controls are gone. The pressures that kept some of the extremists in place are gone. And some of our partners, for instance, in Egypt, Huda would know, are worried about the fact that they're hearing statements that they would never even imagine anybody would hold. Of course, coming from Iran with the Iranian Revolution, to us, it's just business as usual. It's unfortunately the way trends will happen. We were also shocked when we heard in the parliament in Iran, there was the discussion of marriage portion, which is allocated at the time of marriage and will be collected at the time of divorce. They said that let's have an inflation adjusted, because 30 years, you had $100,000, let's say, after 30 years, it's not worth that much, so inflation adjusted. And the parliamentarian says, how about the depreciation of women? I mean, they think that a woman, for instance, I'm not what I was when I was 17 when I got married, and I'm sure Salima is not depreciated as well. We keep thinking that we've appreciated, in certain areas that perhaps depreciated in our waistline. But that's what they think. So these strange things are being heard, and more and more, I think the fundamentalist groups who have the networks, who have the charitable background, who have had educational support and health support for the population, and who have a simple, straightforward, much practiced message, they have the predominant role, and they're going to be the ones who will have the most power unless there is assistance to really hurry up and get the civil society's capacity higher built, and get women's capacity built, and the kind of work that is being done to be geometrically increased, both through technology and also through workshops and trainings.
Thank you. And just for the record, I'm also a woman of the book, and I don't mean Facebook, and it's also part of my identity as well. Good. The lady here wanted to bring up, you wanted to bring up a point, did you? A microphone, please? Get those men running with the microphone. Salima, then I'll come to you now.
So I'm Ginwa Jalloul from Lebanon. I'm currently the chair of a private business called Technology SARL, a former member of the Lebanese parliament and former chair of the Information Technology Parliamentary Committee, and as well a former professor at the American University of Beirut in computer sciences and information technology. So I have the three perspectives of education, politics, and private business, and I hope we'll be able to pass along things that be helpful. I would like to start by saying that I appreciate this conference and I've learned a lot from your intervention. Thank you. In technology, we have the vision. Before I go into technology, coming from Lebanon and from the MENA region and from the Arab world, I believe that we have a big problem there for women to move forward. And the biggest problem that women are facing is illiteracy. We have a large number of highly educated women, motivated, energized, and that will always remain true. But a large percentage as well are completely illiterate. And these, I don't see how we're going to mobilize them to vote or move the political situation or be able to move into betterment of the political situation in the MENA region or in some countries or even in Lebanon. In Lebanon, we pride ourselves of being pioneers. We have no women in the government. The local authorities lack women. I happen to be the only pioneering woman who reach politics on political basis, and I'm out of the parliament now. So what I'm trying to say, if you want really to push and move the status of women forward, and in Lebanon and in the MENA region and maybe in other countries as well, then we have to empower women with two things, education and as well economic empowerment, because this would give them the power to read, to understand, to decide, and really to move forward. These two conditions, we cannot do it in traditional methods. Traditional method has worked, but they are slow. They won't be able to achieve the fast change that we want to achieve. This is our vision. So we went into information technology to have, to see if that can help mobilize things in a faster way. As technology ends out of our social work, we developed a product called Iqra. And you probably know that Iqra is the first word that was told for Prophet Muhammad as an instruction for reading. So Iqra is an Arabic software that teaches Arabic language. And the issue is not only the Arabic language, but you need to read and write and use computers to be able to reach knowledge. We piloted Iqra in 46 centers in Lebanon in 2008 and in Egypt, and we were able to eradicate illiteracy of participating women in 5 working days. The swift way we did it helped us to overcome the barrier challenges, the cultural challenges that Salima was talking about. The men didn't have time to ask women to stay home. It was 5 swift days. They learned to read, write, and use computers, and they asked for more. The women were extremely motivated. They brought their little children, and they were very proud that they are now up to their husbands and children at home who know more than them. We continued with our work. We learned from the women that we are working with also in Lebanon. We eradicated the illiteracy of 1,500 women in a very short few months. We learned from them what other skills we need to develop. We relied on more ICT tools that we have. We are conducting quick training sessions to move them into the working force. One more thing for the entrepreneurs, we are also pushing entrepreneurship very strongly. We are teaching them now from illiteracy, moving the women into ICT skills, into e-commerce, and they needed also the microfinance. Well, microfinance is not always easy to get, but we also came out with an online mall. Not an e-shop on the internet, an online mall with a virtual shop where the entrepreneur women and the artisanal can directly export their business abroad. So we're changing a large number of women who are really marginalized, who do not have any skills, swiftly and quickly, and put them also into the ICT age. What I'm trying to say, we have several success stories. Our last project is called We the Women, if you like, or We Women Empowerment, Economic Empowerment with E-Commerce. It was supported by MEPI. And I want to say microfinancing is not easy at all. Banks are not inclined to help because they are not sure they're getting their money back. The rate of interest is high. And the best way to do it really is, I think technology gave us several success stories. It's documented in the code of practice we submitted here, but as well maybe a fund to support women, and initially that will bring them into to share the economic pie, and if women share the economic pie, I'm sure they'll be able also to rule in politics. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Very good suggestions. Thank you. Thank you very much. Salima, you wanted to come in, and then we'll bring in Dalia.
Yeah. I will just speak about a new policy we had. It's a National Women's Development Policy in Bangladesh, and the policy was to have control over the property, because we don't have equal rights, but 50% we have, but the fundamentalist was raising. But, you know, the interesting thing, the fundamentalist never comes like we have the right of 50%. So when we are deprived from that 50%, they never come with that cause. But what I would like to point today now, at the moment, that, you know, micro enterprise, I always repeat that if we really, because this is a forum of democracy, and we need to bring women to be under the tax net of the country. They must be taxable. Micro enterprise is such a small earning that they are not come to the tax net. So if we can bring them into the small medium, and when they become taxable, they have a greater voice. Then they can talk to the government, then they can say, you government better listen to me because I'm paying taxes to them. But one challenge is women entrepreneurs, or I think all over the world face, that our development partners or the big countries, like if I talk about Bangladesh, you know, like even if I talk about US, because she's in front of me, so they put lots of money for good governance, transparency, accountability, but where is the resources for human resource development? That is so important. Where is the resources for entrepreneurship development? So I think there is another challenge for economic empowerment of women is having resources to develop these human beings.
Just a point, our distinguished gentleman on the panel has to leave. But before, because you have a meeting, and then we're going to bring in Dalia to give her observations. Do you want to leave us with one last thought before you go off to your official meeting? You've heard a lot of the women. You started off saying that things were going well in Mongolia and you'd hoped you'd get even better. What are you going to take back to Mongolia with you? If there's one thing you could change, what will it be?
I learned many things from this wonderful panel. And I learned one thing: if our sisters and mothers and girls are successful, country is going to be successful. And we have to support that.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Tell us one thing you think you should change now in Mongolia to improve the involvement of women in economic life. Leave us with one, and then we'll get back to you about it later.
More loans, more support, and more economic opportunities for the women. Yeah.
Good. You heard it here first. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Good. Now we're going to bring in, I suppose in your terms of your profession, you'd call you a gender expert. Dalia Lenarte is the chair of gender studies, chair of the Gender Studies Center. She's an assistant professor of history. She's also a published expert, and I love the titles of her books, which are called The Society of Married People and Tamed Realities. Now, I don't know whether that had to do with marriage as well, but Dalia, you've been listening to all of these conversations, and I'll bring up again about this idea of prejudice that's in the social barriers that still exist, the kind of things, the obstacles that hold women back. Do you want to add some of your thoughts from your background?
Yes, thank you for giving me the floor. And probably I can't talk just and focus my talk on prejudice, but what I am going to bring some few insights about the role of education, so it's very close to prejudice. So there is no any doubt that education has a huge impact on women's well-being, but on the other hand, and the research shows that there is no direct link between education and women's economic empowerment. And in academy, where I came from, it's absolutely evident and obvious. Actually, I would say it's contrary. The more you are educated in academy, the more you receive less comparatively. So let's bring some statistics. My statistics is focused on Lithuania, but actually probably it could be related to all countries with the exception of Scandinavia, maybe. So on the level of PhD students and those who end PhD, there are 49% of female and 51% of males. Then when you go farther the ladders, we have about 13% of associate professors of women, but only 2% in Lithuania those who received full professorship. That means among 2,500 female researchers, there are around 100 female who end full professors. And that means something lack in the only education. And let it bring my own experience when after all those books that you mentioned, those titles, all those four, I think probably we are 4 books that we are published, and many articles in good scientific journals. Anyway, I didn't earn my full professorship, and only after that, when I sat one day and started thinking what is left here, and the conclusion was that probably I just to break out this glass ceiling and simply, as our president said, simply to go and to take this full professorship, simply to push it, the process, because nobody will bring it. Just go and take what I believed already belonged to me. So probably only combination of two, this is education and leadership, could bring some results that could that could have some impact of women's economic empowerment. And I believe that this positive combination of education and leadership probably can have a good and positive impact right now, as I became a nominee for CEDAW committee from Lithuania, and maybe it will help. So the only education probably would keep every woman just on a zero level. So and what else? We all know that education depends on social environment, and leadership probably comes only from female friendly environment and support, and probably without any good examples and any good encouragements from female community, it's impossible to become strong. And in this case, I just would like to thank you that I met in my career and in my life path some women who bring me that. So probably that's all what I wanted to say about relationships between education and leadership. So we can talk only about the role of education in women's empowerment without the leadership.
Thank you, and thank you for sharing your story. Now, when you found that once you started pushing for yourself, you did get the full professorship.
Yes, sure. I received it maybe in 6 months. So, and of course, when there was some objections against positive discrimination, if, let's say, in our academy we would have quotas for full professorship, then of course, with all my CV, as academician, I would receive it. But we didn't have a positive discrimination, we didn't have quotas. And that is my answer, that we would need quotas even in academy.
It's an important point, and it's mentioned, there's now, bookshelves of books which say that, because of the pay gap between men and women, sometimes it's women to blame. We say, well, we're not doing it for the money, we're doing it because we like it. And sometimes we are well, no, the statistics are there to prove it, that sometimes we're our own worst enemy. And so thank you for sharing your story. Now, I had 2 hands here in the front row. Where's the microphone? There's that lovely gentleman.
Thank you very much. My name is Josefina. I'm the Speaker of the Parliament. I'm from Albania. Many times I asked to myself, why from so long time, from centuries and centuries, we lack the presence of the women at the high levels of politics, of business and other fields? I have not an answer. As Maya Angelou said in his poem, a bird doesn't sing a song because he has an answer. He sings a song because he has a song. What I hear today from all the women in business, in politics, in parliament, etc., I feel the songs which inspires, because you have the voices which you have taken by the millions other women, which you represent here today. I fully agree with the discussion of empowerment of women, of how important is the microfinance, how important is the education. I heard about the religions. Yes, I come from a country who is a Muslim country. I'm a Christian, but nobody counts which religions I am. They have voted. This is politics, and this is enough. No one minds about the religions. During the century, we have had the doors closed. But it's very interesting. For a long time, And today we have been witness of the fact that we have president, woman, from Finland, from Lithuania, speakers of parliament, ministers, etc. So there are many doors opened. But we have looked during the years and maybe the centuries to these doors who are closed, and we do not dare to see that more doors are open. And these doors, these names, this prime minister, this president, this minister, these speakers of the parliament are persons who inspire all the other women. And you know what I have, what I see in my parliament? Every day I meet school children who come in the parliament. I see girls and sons sitting on the seats. But always on the seats of the speaker of the parliament sits girls, only girls. And after that, they said to me that they want to be speakers of the parliament. So this is the role. This is the model that women inspire to all the other women. I'm very keen on the project of the microfinance. We have an idea, and we are working also in Albania for this project. Having our own economic model which has worked, because also now there is a crisis and we have Greece near, which is a big crisis, in Albania we continue with a 5% economic growth. We have tried and we have cut by half the poverty. But I think that these are projects that we have to try. This is a way to empower the woman and also in the same time educate them. Thank you very much.
Role models and another vote for microfinance. Just here, we're going to try to keep very much to the topic of economic empowerment. Yes?
Thank you. I am Faba Gifla. I come from Liberia. I'm the Minister of Gender. I heard you ask a question about microcredit. I didn't say anything. Then I thought about what was happening in my country, and I didn't want us living here believing that microcredit doesn't work. It works. Because if we think about the big cities, if we think about the micro entrepreneur, but I'm sitting here and thinking about thousands of villages, those women in those villages that Village Saving Loans Association has helped to transform their lives. And they just started with something small. They didn't need collaterals. All they needed was their colleagues, and they've been able. I know of one that started with $17,000, and the turnover has gone to over $100,000. I don't know how they do it or how they did it, but it's happening. I look at microcredit as quota for the bigger money. I know our sister here was talking about quotas. You know, in Liberia, we say some know how to walk, others know how to crawl, and some need stick to stand. So when you are strong enough and you can run, you should think about those who need to crawl. And that's what quota does for people. Because we say, while the horses are growing, while the grass is growing, the oxen is dying. So all those years of discrimination that marginalized women, how do you fill that gap before you get the educated women, before you get everybody else? If we don't come in with those interventions, I don't see how we can be able to transform or achieve those decisions that will help push the women forth. So microcredit works. They have Village Saving Loans Associations working for women. In fact, they are now serving as the one who drives the micro-entrepreneurs because they supply and they help the micro-entrepreneurs. We are now looking at women in cross-border trade. They go across the border, bring goods, and this is how it's happening. But whatever later it is, sometimes we say, just give me something small. If you start with the $50, those women are there, and they will tell you we started saving. Now our husbands don't even know what we do with our money because we put our money in the bank. So when there is microcredit, yes, you have women, they will help turn it around. When they come to entrepreneurship, they will still do it. They come to big businesses, they are there. So as we think, we should also remember those villagers that those decisions could impact if we just decided that, oh, it doesn't work. Yes, it works. Thank you.
I'm very glad you changed your mind and decided to say something, because an example from West Africa, where if anyone's been to West Africa, the very strong women there with the traditions of trading and those mama benzes, and they're powerhouses. Thank you very, very much. I'm going to take one more from the floor, and then I'm going to bring it back to my panel and get one very specific thought before we then turn to the next panel.
Thank you very much. I'm Maria Rachkalert, and I'm Vice President of the Women's Group in the European People's Party and a former federal minister from Austria. And I've worked in women's issues for the last 30 years, and we are at the moment discussing, especially in Austria and in Europe, the discussion of quota. And having experienced, and I was not a friend of quota at my early beginnings, and it is difficult in private business, I agree with you, but also Norwegian, for example, has raised the number of women in private business by a quota, especially in the boards, in the advisory boards. And the Lehman Brothers and Lehman Sisters, or at least brothers and sisters, would be a very good example for it. So, but in politics, I have realized in my country, when I was a minister, half of the ministers were female. In the meantime, afterwards, it has changed again. And I feel a backlash in politics. And we shouldn't be naive. A backlash can come. So I think in politics, we can't resist quotas. They might not be elegant, but they are necessary. And they will bring forward what we need. Because if we don't want to wait for another 200 years to have half of the positions in politics, we have to use quotas, and we have to need them obligatory and with sanctions. Otherwise, they won't work. So I think this is the only chance to get involved in a decent time. Thank you very much.
Okay. I gave the floor to the woman in bright pink, only to find there are two women in bright pink, both of them clutching microphones. So in the interest of equality, I'll have to give you the floor too.
Thank you so much. I'll try to be very brief. And I would like to ask the participants of the present panel and also the participants of the previous panel, Eva Fabri, European Center for Women and Technology, to think about lifting one issue today, because we have all the wonderful best practices, but the best practices are from a certain period of historic development. The advice we're going to give from this conference to the girls of the present and the future generation, it has to be technology focused. So can the panels focus on women and technology issue simply as a tool for empowerment? The reason I mention this is that European Commission has been in the recent years extremely active, and Vice President Nelly Cruz of the European Commission on International Women's Day, 100th centenary anniversary, cabled out through Twitter, every woman digital. This has been followed up by a complement to this, equal to smart growth. So I think it would be really important for us to add this, and I was very happy to hear when you mentioned this, Madam Kerori.
Thank you very much. It was mentioned by our Lebanese sister to teach women to read and write, but also give them the very modern skills. As I mentioned at the start, discipline is also a very important skill. We've only got 5 minutes left. I want to bring it back to the panel. Just leave us all with one thing. If you could change one thing about the economic sphere to get women to be more active, more successful, more prominent in the economic sphere, what would it be? Starting with you, Manaz, at the end.
I would have to go back to the feeling of self-determination and agency. I think everything else being unequal, I think still this is the most important piece of it. And to just add to the technology piece, I think that today's world is such that even though technology is not available to vast numbers of people, the people who form opinions and begin changes are the ones who are young, they're being educated and they have access, and movement building and change and culture change is being driven by them. So it's an extraordinarily important thing for us to be able to spread both the availability of technological vehicles and also the content for it. It was a time when, especially in the transitional democracies, we were learning by Twitter and Facebook how to burn tires, get to the Tahrir squares, etc. That's good and it's very helpful and it has made change, but that's much, much easier than learning how to actually give shape to structures and processes that create democracy. And that also can be done through technology, although not exclusively, but it is a very important way of getting the young people to engage with each other and with the rest of the world in formulation of democracies.
Thank you, Manaz. Salim? Yep, that's right.
Just to answer you, technology cannot be the only tool. So it can be one of the two. That's my personal comment. But if I say one thing, because I have developed 3,000 women entrepreneurs, it's in my hand, I see it. So to me is give them an opportunity by building capacity through training, market access, market linkages, product development, design development, and have separate policy, a gender-friendly environment, and then the entrepreneurship will grow.
Well, first of all, if you have your own money, you have power. Sweden is a rich country right now, but we weren't. And when my mother got her first salary, she had power. She could buy her own things. Didn't have to ask my father. She didn't ask that much either. But I think money is power. And that's why women entrepreneurship is so crucial. Because for the first time, you can create your own ID, you can fulfill your dreams, you can earn your own money, and you can decide about your own money. So I'm coming back to women entrepreneurship and innovation. And that's also important because if we create business, if we grow in business, if we deliver results, the rest of the world has to count it. And I think what you see and what you can measure also give you a lot of power. I think we should measure what inequality costs. What does it cost that we are unequal? If we say we are 50% women, 50% men, and we will not empower women to do their best, what does it cost for the world? Please tell us and show it. And what I've seen from a political point of view is that what you measure, you can discuss. And in my field, I'm measuring everything. Gender statistics in every program that we have. Come back and give me the gender facts. And I can say, well, this is a program for men only. And sometimes I get questions from people, why do you have a special program for women? And my answer is, well, look at all the programs. There are special programs for men. Because 90% of all this money goes to men. So if you want to change it, you have to have figures and facts, and you have to show it. We are delivering political programs for the public, not just for men. And if you show it, you can change it.
Thank you, Maud Elizabeth. Savita?
First of all, I think if you want to do something, you have to do this. And secondly, if you want to do, then you need education and knowledge. And third, you need examples which inspires you. And then you need support, and then you have to find support.
So probably I think even if we agree that women do not face such a huge restrictions or problems, anyway, in all fields, in politics, in academy, in business, all of them, they reach some glass ceilings, and probably to reach just small formula of equality, we need education plus leadership and plus positive discrimination. Thank you.
You know, one of the extraordinary things I take from this is look at this panel, look at the audience, is that we have women who've come and men who've come from established and from emerging democracies, and yet some of the problems are the same in terms of education and training and prejudices and social barriers. We talk about quotas, we're talking about quotas everywhere from developing societies to a country like Norway. And yet, the facts remain. Access to education, access to resources. If you come from a rich country like Sweden, a more developed country like Latvia, it is easier. But I think what's really important is that people share these ideas, and I want to thank all of our panelists for sharing all of these ideas. You know that great expression about women hold up half the sky, which they always use? Well, actually, women now want to take over the earth. But there are a few problems to solve, and one of them is going to be the topic of our next session, which is combating violence against women and human trafficking. A very sad reality, but Maria is going to take that session. Don't go away. We're just going to have a technical break to change the panels, but we're going to sort of switch topic and switch panelists. But let's give a round of applause to all of us. Thank you.
Thank you.